Here we go. The Renaissance. Okay, I'm going to go through these first few slides kind of quickly. Sorry, Payson, I forgot to turn it on. Here we go. Renaissance means rebirth, yada yada. Humanism, and then Mirandola coming up with the idea of humanism actually being something that allows humans to pursue the potential that God has put in all of us. Okay, so here we are. We're looking at Italy. We see the boot. Okay, it's very distinctive. Looking, we know about this because of Rome. We've studied Rome. So there's Rome in the middle. We're going to come back and we're going to see how that the land was not unified. So it was kind of like the Greek city-states. All these city-states. An interesting thing about them, remember when we talked about Pepin the Short? Pepin the Short had given this land right here, this yellow stuff, to the Pope. He was the French king, and it was called the Donation of Pepin. And this became what is known as the Papal States. So not only is it owned by the church, but the church runs it politically. So it's a political thing for them. All the rest of these little areas, here's Milan, here's Tuscany. That's going to be a big, today we're going to have a lot of stuff about Tuscany. We have Venice, all the Siena, Naples down here, Sicily, Corsica. They all have their little city-state run things. And furthermore, they don't like each other very much. Okay, so there's a lot of competition between them, and not in a good way. And then the Pope gets the final say because, right, he's the head of the whole church, and so he pulls more weight that way. Let's see. So kings and princes up in Europe started looking down at Italy saying, Italy's a mess politically, so I think maybe we could go down and take some of the land and make it part of ours and make our kingdom bigger. Already Naples had been taken over by the French Normans. The Norman dukes had taken that over many, many years ago, about the year 1066, in fact. The same time they took over England. They took over parts of France, down here in Napoli. All right, so they're going to have a big battle. We're going to see big fights over these parts of Italy, and none of the Europeans are going to do very well there. So Italy's going to remain itself. I will tell you this. Italy did not become a single nation until just before the 20th century. So at the time of World War II, Italy was still a very young nation because they had all these separate city-states until that time. So we're going to start here in Tuscany. All right, Tuscany is beautiful. Just the name, right? Look at some of the cities we find here. Florence, Pisa. You've heard of Pisa, right? There's a famous tower there. It leans. Right? We have Siena. Really, if we want to talk about, I think there's probably a lot of competition even to this day to say, where did the Renaissance begin? Okay, we're going to talk about the Renaissance beginning in Florence, but I promise you the people of Siena will say, it started in Siena. But look how close it is to Florence. Florence quickly took over. So if it did start in Siena, Florence quickly became the center of everything. We see some of these other little places here, but it's right here in that top part of the boot. There are mountains up here to the top. See, that's Switzerland up there. So these mountains, those are actually the Alps that are up there, okay? And so this area of northern Italy is very mountainous, and it's therefore cut off from the other part of Europe, making it a little difficult to invade the area. We know that, remember, Hannibal brought in the elephants over the Alps there. This is what Tuscany looks like. I don't know about y'all, I think that's beautiful. Look at those great trees there. Here we have an estate up on a hill. They're actually growing, these are vineyards, so they have a lot of grapes that grow there, a lot of olives that grow there. A huge wine production in Italy, so Italian, the different kind of grapes that grow especially in Italy for wine production. All right, so here we are in Florence. This is the Arno River. So in these times, medieval times, Roman times, most of the cities grew up around rivers, right? So they had a source of water. So here's the Arno. I want to point out this bridge right here. Now see these other bridges back here in the background? Those are all fairly modern, but this bridge right here in the front is a famous bridge called the Ponte Vecchio, which we'll get to in just a second. Here's what the city looks like. This is the old part of the town today. What do you notice about it?
It's not a big, I think, church.
Yeah, yeah. The red roofs, right? That's a law in Florence. They have to have the red tile roof. That's a special kind of clay that comes from the area. I think it's technically over in Siena where the clay comes from. And so it's a rule. I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but have you ever been to the University of Texas in Austin? Hook 'em horns, right? You ever noticed all the roofs there are red? Same deal. In the middle part of the old part of the University of Texas, it's a rule that all the roofs have to be red like this. And I think they might get it from Italy there. All right, so we're going to take a look at that in just a minute because it is kind of the central piece. That's the big dome in the middle there. Oh, they invented gelato. Remember Marco Polo had gone to China and they had that creamy, cold dessert that they served, and he brought it back, or the idea of it, and so the Italians perfected it's called gelato. Yes, James.
Do you know why you have to have a red roof?
In UT or here?
There.
I think it was a city pride thing, and that clay was something that was, you know. And I think that in the modern, I don't know, that all of the modern stuff with this guy has red roofs too. Yeah. Does anybody want some gelato?
Yes.
Y'all would like some gelato? Okay, y'all. I'm gonna Payson, I'm giving everybody gelato right now, but I'm gonna pause this. All right. For the record, Payson, the gelato is good.
It's
all right.
delicious.
So I will tell you that when you go to Europe, to Italy, the gelato shops are all over the place, and they have just umpteen different flavors and stuff like that. So every city I went to in Italy, I tried the gelato every time, a different flavor every time. All right, so they're very proud of it. Now, art is going to be the driving force of the Renaissance. Okay, so the innovations in art is what started everything. So our first guy we're going to talk about, this guy is a medieval artist, and his name is Cimabue. That's how you pronounce it. Cimabue. Now, so he was a superstar, but he's not quite Renaissance yet. Okay? So he used the traditional Byzantine backgrounds, but he added something new. He gave the human form shape. So you could see shape underneath it. So the Byzantine pictures are like the icons, very flat. You know, the people holding their hand like this with the three fingers, that kind of thing, with a lot of gold leaf on it, this kind of thing. So, but he started to make a more realistic look. It says here, he dared to admit that the body has curves. All right, so let's take a look at something here. This is called the Madonna Enthroned, and look how you can see her leg coming out right here. So Mary was human.
Did you resume the recording?
I did, thank you very much. All right, so we can see her arm, we can see her leg under here. The hands, I think I'm going to maybe show you. Oh, here, let's get closer right here. Oh, really quickly, it's at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. So we can see right here, it looks still very Byzantine, right? It looks like the icons of the Byzantine Empire with the gold back here, very kind of flat looking, but we can start to see some rounding taking place. Look at the folds in the garment right there, beautiful. I don't know about y'all, who's an artist in here? It's hard to paint these kind of things, yeah? To give that kind of depth to it, this kind of thing. All right, so Cimabue was not is best known. He was a rock star, but he's best known for his student called Giotto. Some people pronounce his name Giotto. Okay, I pronounce it Giotto. So here's the story. We don't know if it's true. Okay, could be apocryphal. This boy, Giotto, here he is, a young boy. He was out in the fields taking care of the sheep. He was the shepherd for his family. He was out there taking care of them. And he was drawing the sheep on a rock and coloring it with the chalk type of rock on this kind of thing. And one day, Cimabue comes riding along, and he sees this little boy riding on the rock, drawing on the rock. And he looked at it and said, oh, that's really beautiful. Did you do that? He goes, oh, yeah, I was drawing. And so he noticed that this child had really excellent artistic abilities even at a young age. And so Cimabue went to the boy's father, and he said, listen, I noticed your son is very artistic. I am Cimabue the Great, and I would like to take him to town with me to Florence and teach him all of the techniques of the great painters. How do you feel about that? And the dad was like, yeah, sure. Will he get paid? He said, well, he's going to be an intern, or what do you call that? Apprentice. But it would lead toward him having a really fine job in the city that was just coming to prominence in Florence. And so the dad did let Giotto go, and so he did become one of the painters in the bodega of Cimabue. So here he is, growing up. He's older now, obviously, and he's painting a picture here for Cimabue. Now, the way it worked, I think this might be Cimabue right here. The way it worked is that in these bodegas like this, the master, which would have been Cimabue, he was in charge of all the detail, like a person's face, hands, things like this. But the background was painted by his apprentices. So Giotto first started by putting in the background, you know, the hills, the whatever he wanted, the trees, whatever the master wanted on there. And then he would graduate to more and more difficult things to do, all right, by learning from them. And so, for instance, one time Giotto had painted the faces on this beautiful painting. Typically, they would be on a wall in a church, so what we call a fresco that was painted on the wall. So this was being painted on there, and one day Giotto played a trick on his master. So Cimabue went out to probably go collect some money from somebody or something, and while he was gone, Giotto painted a fly on the nose of the face that Cimabue had just finished. Okay? When Cimabue came back and he saw it, he tried to brush the fly away. It was that realistic looking. And so that's when he realized, oh, the student has outstripped the master at this point. That's when he started letting Giotto paint faces. So if you can see right here, this, we believe, is this painting right here. That is the painting of a famous up-and-coming literary giant. His name is Dante. We'll get to Dante here in just a minute when we talk about literature. So Giotto, very quickly as he grew up, became the master of his own bodega. And he was a little bit, okay, there's kind of some conflicting stories about him. Some stories say that he was a real arrogant jerk because he was so good. He was like, yes, I know how good I am, kind of a thing. But other people say he was very kind, and they say that because he had a wife that he kept, he had one wife. They had 8 children, 4 girls and 4 boys, and he was very happy. He lived till he was 70 years old. They think they found his skeleton buried in one of the churches where he spent a lot of time painting on the wall, and he only stood about 4 feet 2, so he was a little guy, we think. And they think it's him because they said his teeth were worn away where a painter would have been holding a paintbrush. I don't know if you see that in their teeth, I don't know. But so some people say he was kind of arrogant jerk, some people say he was a kind family man kind of a deal. I choose to believe the latter because I'm an optimist. All right, so, but here's one of the things that some people say makes him sound like a jerk. All right, the Pope put out to all the artists in all of Italy and said, I want you to send to me your most beautiful painting, so I will judge, guys, so I will judge who's the best painter in all of Italy. I, the Pope, being Pope. Remember, there's a little tension between all these city-states. So in Florence, they came to him and they said, Giotto, you are supposedly the greatest painter. Make a great painting to send to the Pope. He says, I'll make a painting for the Pope. And he took out his brush and he painted on whatever, I think it was a board at the time. They painted on wooden boards at this time. And he did a perfect circle. If you've ever taken an art class, they have you draw circles a lot. And they try to get you to draw the circles really well. And it's not easy. So he took out that thing, dipped it in the red paint. Whoosh, he goes, here, deliver that to the Pope. And that was the painting he sent, for real. And everybody's like, but everybody looked at it and said, did he do that with a machine? Did he have some? But no, he did it, and it was a perfect O. And so the standard became to become as round as Giotto's O. So if you got to that, you've reached the status of Giotto. So was he being a jerk? I don't know. This is one of the, now I will tell you, not a lot of his paintings survive. It's just been so long ago. This is a fresco on the Cappella Scrovegna in Padova, Italy. Okay, did it in 1305. This is called the Adoration of the Magi. The Magi are the wise men. Here they are coming to the baby Jesus. And you can see a couple of things here. First of all, notice in the manger scene right here, I have depth. Do you see that? It's not flat. I can see there's depth to that main. Is that the stable? I guess the stable. So I'm showing a little bit of perspective here. Okay, perspective is still kind of coming in to popularity at this point. There's also quite a bit of blue on the wall. So I will tell you, when you're painting in fresco, everything, you get the paint, and the fresco, the wall has got wet plaster on it, and you paint on the wet plaster, except for blue. Blue is applied a secco, which means dry. You have to wait till the plaster completely dries before you add the blue. Otherwise, the blue turns into a funny color. It doesn't stay blue. Blue also was a very expensive, to get these colors, you had to grind things like rocks. Ochre, red ochre, things like this. You grind the red and make it into red. For blue, you had to grind something called lapis lazuli. We wear it as jewelry. So it was a semi-precious stone. So it was very expensive to have blue in your painting. So you see a lot of blue there. We have the star, of course, of Bethlehem right there. And baby Jesus. And we see curves on the people. So that's this is the beginning. So some people call him the last medieval artist. Some people call him the first Renaissance artist. Here is a painting on wood right here of the crucifixion. It's in Rimini, Italy. So notice on panel, when I say on panel, that's a panel of wood that it's painted on there. Definitely you can see some depth to his body. You can see his curved legs. All right, so the body is hanging there. It doesn't look flat, straight like the Byzantines would, okay? This is a fresco in Padua, that go across the wall, and it's the last week of Jesus' life, so the Passion Week. And here we have Judas kissing Christ, and they're coming to arrest him right there. All right, you even see what we call movement here. They're in the middle of action, like we took a snapshot with a photo right in the middle of somebody moving. Instead of everybody stopping and giving a pose, he's doing this painting that's happening right in the middle of the action. All right, this one is considered the first Renaissance painting. Now, this looks to me a whole lot like Cimabue, the one we saw from Cimabue, right? And so a few other things are a little different. We have our fat little Jesus here, the legs here, the fat legs. But still a lot of gold, still a lot of the Byzantine structure right there. But this one's considered the first Renaissance painting. All right, some other artists at the time, some who you might find to be even better than Giotto, but learned from him. They took some of those techniques and applied them. This is Fra Angelico. Fra meaning father. He's a priest. So he was a friar, a Dominican friar. He painted in the style of Giotto. They were all devoted to religious themes. They had lifelike rounded figures. He put his subjects in otherworldly settings and filled with light and gold backgrounds. So one of my favorite paintings of all time is his Annunciation. Okay, so this is Mary. Look at that beautiful blue cloth right there. This is the angel Gabriel coming to make the announcement that she's going to have a child. It's going to be the Son of God. All right, so a couple of things here. First of all, look at the building. You see how I'm going inward here and I see back here a room? That is some excellent perspective right there. Okay, that's not easy to do. It's coming in, it shows us, it tends to look real right there. We also have some background information here. This is the fall. Here's Adam and Eve who are leaving, and here is the light from God who are coming to redeem the people after the fall. He's going to save them by bringing Jesus into the world. Beautiful. We still have a lot of gold. We have a lot of gold in here. We have some gold on the floor and on the walls and things like this, and in Mary's in the halo. The halo is pretty common for holy people. All right, so I think that's a beautiful painting. Oh, this is the Adoration of the Magi. Once again, we're going to see that over and over again. It's a very popular subject. That's the wise men coming. Now, this is painted in tondo. I mean, it's round. Okay, round is a very difficult medium. And the reason is because a painting needs to have balance. So if it doesn't have balance, if it's too heavy on one side, it might just roll away. You know, that round thing's just going to roll away. And so it's very important to keep the balance here. It is on some sort of panel of wood. So you feel like he's achieved balance. We've got a big mountain over here and some people. And supposedly over here the balance is maintained by God himself, balancing out this side right over here. There's also a lot of symbols in it. The peacock means eternal life. Whatever that is means something. I don't know what it is. And you can see a little perspective right in there. All right. So this is still Fra Angelico. All right, literature. So the writing is beginning now also. So remember, if we have time for art and literature, that means we have a civilization that is doing really well. All right, they have time to do these things. They're not just worried about getting food. So Dante is the first guy we want to talk about. There's the painting. Earlier we saw the one that was being painted by Giotto, right? He was painting Dante, who was on the rise of becoming a very important writer. Now, he's considered the last medieval writer. He wrote something called the Divine Comedy. Have you heard of that? Have you heard of the Inferno? That's the most famous of the three. All right, we're going to watch a little video here in just a second. But the idea is that he's going to take us through the Inferno, take us through hell, and then through purgatory, basically climbing a mountain to get to the top of the mountain, which is paradise, which is heaven. So it's essentially a tale of redemption and this kind of thing, but it also has a whole lot of stuff about the politics going on at Florence at the time. So he was actually kicked out of Florence because he was fighting against the ruling class. So one side of the ruling class wanted to side with the Pope, and the other side thought the Pope was gaining too much power. So there was this inside, they were called the Ghents and the Ghibellines, and they're called the Guelphs. You split the Ghibellines and the Ghents into groups are called the white Guelphs and the black Guelphs. It doesn't matter. It's too much stuff for us to deal with right now. But here's the great story. One day, Dante was in the city of Florence before he had been kicked out, and this beautiful woman walked by. And her name is, I get it mixed up with the other guy, Beatrice, because Petrarch has Laura. This is Beatrice. He sees her walk by. She does not know him, all right? But he saw her and he went, and he fell in love with her right then. Okay? Head over heels. Now, she's a married woman, doesn't even know who he is. For the rest of his life, he was in love with this woman. Okay? He dedicated the Divine Comedy to her. In fact, that's what he was doing. He was going through hell, purgatory, to get to heaven where she was, because she actually died, and he was brokenhearted. Now, mind you, he had a wife at home, all right, that had been an arranged marriage. So kind of sad for her, because he was in. This woman would have been considered his muse, right? She gave him this inspiration for all of his work and stuff like that. So there he is, seeing her, saying, huh? And then he's going to write this story. So the Inferno has the circles of hell. The deeper you go, the farther down you get. It gets worse and worse and worse. I've read it a couple of times. It's very creepy. They ought to make a movie about it, but it's so creepy. But these days, with all the special effects and stuff, I mean, I wouldn't watch it because it'd be too creepy. But it does tell these stories. So as he's going in, at the very top is a place called Limbo. These are people who are not allowed into heaven because they were here before Jesus came. So some of the classical people. So the person who's going to lead him through and show him everything in hell is Virgil. Remember, Virgil wrote the Aeneid? He's the Roman writer who wrote the Aeneid. So he is in limbo, and so are people like who were before Christ, or people who died before they were baptized. In other words, babies. Babies are there. And so they just have to stay in limbo. And as he goes down, kind of spirals down, Virgil is explaining to him what's happening here. This is one of the most, in my mind, one of the most frightening ones, where the people are head down in a hole and their feet are on fire for eternity. You know, there's also the one my kids remembered all the time is there's people who'd been turned into trees. And what was happening in there is there were these animals that were eating the leaves off the trees, and it was like picking flesh off of these people. They were crying in pain. It's really horrible. So let's watch a little video about it. Let's watch it.
It's a TED Talk.
Yeah. Anyone?
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Inscribed above the gate of hell, these ominous words warn dark tidings for Dante as he begins his descent into Inferno. Yet despite the grim tone, this prophecy sets into motion what is perhaps the greatest love story ever told, an epic journey that encompasses both the human and the divine. But for Dante to reach benevolent salvation, he must first find his way through hell. This landscape of torture is the setting for Inferno, the first in a three-part narrative poem written by Dante Alighieri in the 14th century. Casting himself as the protagonist, Dante travels deeper and deeper into hell's abyss, witnessing obscene punishments distinct to each of its 9 realms. Beginning in limbo, he travels through the circles of lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, and fraud, to the horrific 9th circle of treachery, where sinners are trapped under the watchful eyes of Satan himself. The following 2 parts, Purgatorio and Paradiso, continue Dante's journey as he scales the Mount of Purgatory and ascends the 9 celestial spheres of heaven. Written together over 10 years, these 3 sections comprise the Divine Comedy, an allegorical imagining of the soul's journey towards God. But Dante's Divine Comedy is more than just religious allegory. It's also a witty, scathing commentary on Italian politics. A soldier and statesman from Florence, Dante was staunchly faithful to God, but often critical of the Roman Catholic Church. He particularly disliked its rampant nepotism and practice of simony, the buying and selling of religious favors such as pardons from sin. Many groups took advantage of these corrupt customs, but few supported them as much as the Guelfi Neri, or Black Guelphs. This was a political and religious faction which sought to expand the Pope's political influence. Dante was a member of the Guelfi Bianchi, or White Guelphs, who believed Florence needed more freedom from Roman influence. As a public representative for the White Guelphs, Dante frequently spoke out against the Pope's power, until the Black Guelphs leveraged their position to exile him from Florence in 1302. But rather than silencing him, this lifelong exile led to Dante's greatest critique of all. Dishonored and with little hope of return, The author freely aired his grievances with the church and Italian society. Writing the Divine Comedy in Italian, rather than the traditional Latin of the educated elite, Dante ensured the widest possible audience for his biting political commentary. In the Inferno's circle of the wrathful, Dante eagerly witnesses sinners tear Black Guelph Filippo Argenti limb from limb. In the circle of fraud, Dante converses with a mysterious sinner burning in the circle's hottest flames. He learns that this is Pope Nicholas III,
The Pope.
who tells Dante that his two successors will take his place when they die, all three guilty of simony and corruption. Despite the bleak and sometimes violent imagery in Inferno, the Divine Comedy is also a love story. Though Dante had an arranged marriage with the daughter of a powerful Florentine family, he had also been unrequitedly in love with another woman since he was 9 years old, Beatrice Portinari. Despite allegedly meeting just twice, she became Dante's lifelong muse, serving as the inspiration and subject for many of his works. In fact, it's Beatrice who launches his intrepid journey into the pits of hell and up the terraces of Mount Purgatory. Portrayed as a powerful heavenly figure, she leads Dante through Paradiso's concentric spheres of heaven until he is finally face to face with God. In the centuries since its publication, the Divine Comedy's themes of love, sin, and redemption have been embraced by numerous artists, from Auguste Rodin and Salvador Dali to Ezra Pound and Neil Gaiman. And the poet himself received his own belated earthly redemption in 2008, when the city of Florence finally revoked Dante's antiquated exile. Next, find out.
Okay, so he had the sitting pope in his book. That pope was burning in hell. I mean, so this was a major scandal. The pope banned the book, but the people who agreed with him, so the white Guelphs in Florence, a lot of them had been kicked out too. They loved it, you know, and it was written in Italian. It was very popular that way, and it is written in that vernacular as well. So it's kind of easy. It's some ancient literature that's kind of easy to understand, really. You know, of course they've translated into English now. Yes.
How long is the book?
Well, so it's 3 parts, and the biggest part is the Inferno, and it's pretty long. Yeah, it's pretty long, and then Paradiso's the smallest one, I think. Purgatorio. So with what I did with my kids is we read all of the Inferno, and then we read selections out of Purgatorio and Paradiso because they're not as famous. And then we had to learn some of that politics that was going on as well. All right, Petrarch's the other guy. Okay, so he also has an unrequited love story as well. So he was inspired by Dante. He's considered the first writer of the Renaissance. His name is Petrarch, and he was more of a poet. He used Italian like Dante had, so he was inspired that way. So he writes a lot of poetry. And the woman that he saw when he was young, he saw this woman named Laura, and he fell in love with her. She didn't know him, so he tended to write all of his poetry to her, and he did invent the 14-line sonnet. So y'all know what sonnets are, right? You probably do that in English class or whatever. He's the guy that invented it. So it's got to have a certain number of syllables per line, is that correct? It's 14 lines with a certain syllabication that goes on there. They were written for her, and they express the human pleasures of love. Okay, so they were love sonnets, love poems to her. But once again, he's a humanist, so he was all couched in a Christian worldview. So he wasn't rejecting God, nothing like that. All right, so it's a lyric poem. It's written in this iambic pentameter. All right, that's the syllabication that goes on there. So it's very strict. So we have the 8-line octave, the 6-line sestet, the volta or turn and change in focus, and the rhyme scheme. You know these rhyme schemes, A, B, B, A, B, B, A, that kind of thing when you rhyme. I appreciate poems that rhyme. I prefer Dr. Seuss, right? Rhymes, you know, and it's much more easy to do. Now, it was rhyming, of course, in Italian. So it's kind of a challenge for people when they put it over into English to try to get those rhyme schemes down. It's much more difficult that way. Oh, here's one. Where the green leaves exclude the summer beam, and softly bend as balmy breezes blow, and where the liquid laps the lucid stream across the fretted rock is heard to flow. That's pretty good rhyming right there. Yeah, that's pretty good in English since it was originally written in Italian. So I'm guessing in your homework you're going to have a Petrarchian poem to read. Okay, so you'll read that during your homework. All right, in 1439 we have one of the greatest inventions of all time. It happened in Germany. This is Johannes Gutenberg, and he invented what is known as movable type and the printing press, essentially. So what happened here was very difficult. Before this time, all books were handwritten, one sentence at a time, and you had to be very rich to own books. And so he invented this deal where presses were around. If you had a whole page that you could be made out of metal, and it was backwards, of course, and you put ink on it and you press down the thing and you have a page. Well, he invented movable type. So he didn't invent the printing press. He invented the printing press that was much more practical. Every letter could be put in separately, so you could change it. Okay, so that's how it was done for a long time before the computer age came about. So you can see right here, they can print them on the paper right here. He's literally pressing it. He's inking it, putting it in there, and pressing it with this giant press screw right there. And then they have where they could send out lots of them. So lots of things could be out. Now, the number one thing you can imagine, what would be the number one thing people wanted printed?
The Bible.
Correct. So here is a copy of the Gutenberg Bible. Today, I believe there are 9 copies, original Gutenberg Bibles from the 1400s, and the University of Texas at Austin owns one of them. So in order to see it at UT Austin, you have to make an appointment, and who knows now with the whole COVID thing. But they'll let you come in, and you can't touch it or anything, but they'll let you come in and take a look at it. And it is beautiful. And there's at least 3 in America of the 9 that are still existing today, and one of them at UT. So, all right, back in Florence, here we are. We're going to see what's going on. We're going to see all the art that's going on here. So the model Italian city-state. So it was a republic. So America is a republic. Did you know that? We're called a representative republic. Some people call America a democracy. That is not correct. A republic is where you get people to represent you, and then if you don't like the way they represented you, vote them out of office, right? So that means that if we had a true democracy, it'd be like a mob rule. That's what they did in the Greek times, right? Everybody would write somebody's name on the little piece, and they'd kick them out. It'd just be mob rule. So here we have groups of people. Now, the ones that became important were the families of merchants, okay? And so there were the rich families. There were 21 guilds, seven of which were merchants or bankers, and they were called the fat people. So the fat people were the most important people. They weren't necessarily literally fat, but they were fat with wealth and this kind of thing. And so they were the ones that pulled a lot of weight when it came time for the city to make a decision about something. And they would vote on it because they're a republic. The gold coin that they made there was called the florin. This is a copy of it right here. They pressed those themselves. Florence became so influential in the world that they actually used the florin as the currency throughout all of Europe. Everybody wanted this gold coin, not just any gold coin. So the Florentines became super influential financially. It became renowned for its red cloth. So they dyed this red cloth. It was sort of like felt, really. It was kind of a heavy cloth. And they would sell it mostly in the north where it was colder and the people would wear it. And so everybody around the whole of Europe wanted to get a hold of some of this Florentine red cloth. So once again, world famous for that, world famous for their gold coins. All right, there were 14 other guilds. They were craftsmen, like artisans, tailors, weavers. They didn't have as much political power, but they did have favorites. Like they were kept, one of the fat people groups might take them under their wing kind of a thing and listen to them. All right, so here's the Arno River, and here are the craftsmen on this side. We're going to look at Ponte Vecchio here in a minute, and the other buildings over there. All right, so among the fat people, this is the family I want you to remember. When you think of Florence in the Renaissance, you're going to think of the Medici family. All right, this is Giovanni de' Medici. Okay, you'll hear people pronounce it Medici. That's wrong. It's Medici. All right, so this is Giovanni. He was, the government was run that there be one person voted as the mayor, or whatever you call them. They're called the Signora. The Signora is the group. The head of the Signora is called the Gonfalonier. And you're supposed to only be able to be elected to that post once in your lifetime, maybe twice. And so what happened with Giovanni, he had his time as Gonfalonier, And then he just ran things not with the official title, but he told everybody what to do. So he was really in charge of the city. He's kind of the king of this city. So de facto, okay, he's the de facto leader. So de facto means, in fact, describes practices that exist in reality even if not recognized by the laws. So he was running the city de facto, okay, even though officially not. His son is this guy, okay, so Cosimo de' Medici. And so Cosimo comes along. He kind of kept a low profile. He was a great patron of the arts, so he's really going to be the driving force around the beginning of this Renaissance and making Florence this big, great city. Patronage attracted many scholars to come to his academy. He had the Platonic Academy named after Plato. He modeled it after Plato's academy. And here it is, right? So he is going to, he is the de facto ruler of Florence. We see it right here. And he is going to have people come and learn about Plato. And this era is called Neoplatonism. So neo being new Platonic thought. So this is, remember, we're capturing now classical thought versus biblical thought. So they're having more of an emphasis on Greek works than they are on biblical works. So that's called the Platonic Academy. All right, so here's some of our artists right here. That big church that we'll get to in just a minute, the big church was built. It's the Florence Cathedral. It's called the Duomo. Outside of it is this building called the Baptistry. And baptistry is where people get baptized. All right, so the city got their groups together, all those guilds together, and they said, okay, we need to have artists compete because we want to put doors on the baptistry, these big, beautiful brass doors, and we want them decorated. And we've decided we want them decorated with themes of baptism. That makes sense, right? But there's some Old Testament, one side was going to be Old Testament, one side was going to be New Testament. And we have three guys right here. These are the three finalists. Everybody was asked to make a little panel and submit it to the city and to see who was going to win. And so we have a couple of guys. This guy's name is Filippo Brunelleschi. Okay, he's one of my favorite guys, right? We're going to learn more about him. He's not going to win, okay? Then we have his best friend, Donatello. You may have heard of him. He's not a green frog. There he is, Donatello. And then we have somebody nobody's ever heard of here, Ghiberti. All right, guess who wins? Ghiberti wins. Okay, that's actually part of the sculpture in the doors of the baptistry, right there. He put himself in there. So that is Ghiberti, sculptured by himself. So this was a sculpture competition. Ghiberti wins, and these are the doors. So here are the people standing, and look at the doors, y'all. And it's not just a set of doors. I think there's like 8 sides, so 8 sets of doors. But I think they started with just 4 sets of doors. You can see how big they are here. The panels on each one of these have a story being told. And there you can see what's happening. Oh, this is obviously David killing Goliath right here. So look at those sculptures. Now this thing is sitting outside in the city square. So it's going to be hard to take care of these brass things, but apparently they keep them polished and keep them protected from the weather, I guess. Because they still, I went and saw them. They're beautiful. Here's another one here. That one's a little darker though. Look, it's sticking out. Can anybody tell what's happening there? I cannot tell.
The walls of Jericho?
Is it? Oh, I see trumpets. I see what you're saying right up there. Maybe that. Yeah, maybe so. So, that one side of the doors were about the Old Testament. All right. So Filippo Brunelleschi was he finished in 2nd place, and he said, "2nd place is not good enough. I am no longer a sculptor." He said, "No longer will I be a sculptor." So he said, "I'm going to go pursue other art." So he said, "Let's get out of here." And they went to Rome. He and Donatello, his best friend, went to Rome. And when they got there, they found the ruins of Rome, some of them actually still partially buried. People had completely forgotten about them, and they were in ruins already. So he gets there with his friend, and they say, okay, I know what we're going to do. Let's draw this so we can show people in Florence what the beautiful ruins of Rome look like. And he started drawing things, and he realized he couldn't put on 2-dimensional paper how it looked in 3 dimensions. So he's really the one credited with the idea of perspective in drawing. So he's the guy that came up with the idea of the vanishing point. Y'all, this is like 3rd grade art class, right? Where you draw your train tracks, coming down like this, right? Like that. So now you can see what's going to happen here. All these lines, so let's see the lines on the floor, they're all going to end up at the vanishing point. And that vanishing point is going to be the center of our attention. And so he kind of looked at this and he said, I know, I can't be a sculptor, And I'm not really that great of a draftsman as far as art and painting, but you know what I can do? I can take these truths right here and apply it toward architecture. So he wanted to become an architect. So he's going to be our Renaissance architect. If you have a question on your midterm, who was the great Renaissance architect? It's Filippo Brunelleschi, okay? So he gets back to Florence, and there is the Santa Maria del Fiore. Okay, it's the beautiful, beautiful church of Florence. Now notice, it doesn't have a dome. This church had been built, and they had this big open, eight-sided area here that didn't have a dome. I think it stood there without a dome for over 100 years. All right, there had been no dome. And that's because they couldn't figure out how to build a dome. All right, how did they get, it's really a big space to cover. They had bitten off a little more than they could chew as far as the architecture goes. And so Filippo had an idea. So here he is, there's the church in the window back there, no dome. And he's coming up with an idea. And so they had a contest, another contest. They said, okay, we're going to see who has the best design for a dome. And so all these different artisans come up and they have their ideas for the dome. They had ideas like, for instance, one of the deals was, well, because how do you support the dome while you're building it? That's the big question. So one of the ideas, fill up the entire church with dirt and then build the dome. And then they said, well, then we're going to have a bunch of dirt inside the church. How do we get it out? Okay, here, I have an idea. While we're filling it with dirt, let's put some gold coins in there so we can get the poor people of the city to take the dirt out while they're digging for coins in there. So that was one of the ideas.
That's smart.
And so Filippo said, here he is, he said, I have a wonderful idea. So he comes before the group and he says, I have a perfect idea. I promise you it's going to work. And they said, well, show us your design. I'm not going to show you the designs. Why won't you show us? He said, because then you'll know what I'm going to do and you'll steal it. And he said, how about this? Whoever here can stand an egg on its end should win the contest. And everybody's like, well, that's kind of right. Okay, great. So they all get their egg and they're trying to stand them up and they're falling over and this kind of stuff. And Filippo says, okay, my turn. He takes the egg and he cracks it just a little bit on the bottom and he stands it up. And they said, well, if we had known that, we would have done that. He goes, precisely. That's why I will not show you my dome plans. And so that's when the people judging it said, we give it to you, Filippo. And so Filippo got it. It's a great story. And so what he did was he came up with an idea that had a double dome. So there's on the inside and on the outside. And he was going to be able to do this without any scaffolding. It's really quite ingenious. The guy's a genius. All right, you can see a little closer right here. So we have the double here. There's actually stairs. You can actually go, I've been up in it. Yeah, you can go up to the top. It's a beautiful view from up there. We're going to watch, there it is, being built. The skyline is finally complete. We're going to watch a video, I think. There it is. The beautiful dome. Yes, and here comes our video. Let's see what he did.
Imagine this. It's 1418 in Florence, Italy. You've been challenged to build a great dome for the Santa Maria del Fiore, one of the grandest cathedrals ever built. And you have no formal architectural training. No pressure, right? For Filippo Brunelleschi, a goldsmith and clockmaker, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. He considered the challenge carefully. Then proposed a daring plan, using methods that experts don't fully understand even to this day. At the time, domes were often built as semicircles. But the town fathers required that Brunelleschi build an 8-sided dome that would be even taller and stronger. It would also have no central support system to hold it up during construction. Even worse, the dome's base was an imprecise octagon with no true center. But Brunelleschi had that covered. There would be 2 domes instead of one, an inner and an outer shell, held together by giant brick arches and interlocking rings of stone and wood. The rings would work like hoops on a barrel, keeping the dome from expanding outward. To move heavy loads hundreds of feet up, Brunelleschi designed ingenious machines, including an ox-driven hoist and massive lifting devices far ahead of their time. So, revolutionary design? Check. Groundbreaking engineering? Check. Can-do attitude? Check. but with no central support system, how would he actually build it? First off, the masonry would have to support itself during construction. To do this, Brunelleschi placed the bricks in a herringbone pattern, which spiraled to the top of the dome, with vertical bricks acting as bookends to hold the others in place. They laid about one row a week, giving the mortar time to cure. At this rate, the dome grew at a snail's pace of about a foot a month. But perhaps most puzzling is how he was able to place the bricks with such precision. Many experts agree that he used guide ropes. One theory states that ropes ran from a flower pattern on the work platform that showed exactly where the bricks should go. Another has ropes running from the dome's center, tracing a series of cones that grew smaller as they ascended to the top. Still another suggests a different arrangement of
We don't
central
know how he
ropes
did it.
and wooden templates. However it was done, it worked. The 8 faces of the dome met at the top precisely, just as Brunelleschi had planned. In all, it took 16 years to complete the dome. When he died in 1446, Brunelleschi left behind no sketches and no details as to exactly how he achieved his masterpiece. Today, it remains the largest masonry dome in the world, more than 500 years after it was built.
So notice that campanile wasn't added till much later, 50 years or so later. Okay, now his buddy, Donatello, decided to remain a sculptor and will become our first Renaissance sculptor with his statue of David. All right, so this isn't the famous statue of David, but it is very famous because it was the first one. Only stands, it's life size, so 5, 6 feet tall or whatever. So it's kind of strange. He's standing on the head of the Goliath right down here. He's got an unusual hat there, but also it's in the round. It's completely round, like the ancient Greeks. It's also nude. Okay, so this was something that kind of the church was like, but now we're recapturing the Greek, right? We're recapturing them. Those were all nudes. And so they're showing that. There's his face right there. I don't quite get the hat. But this was all of the talk of the town. Okay, when it comes to painting, so advances in painting, we have this guy, Masaccio. Masaccio, that's a nickname, and it means something like little barrel or something like that. He was kind of, kind of stout kind of a guy. That's actually a self-portrait right there. He's going to also be looking at what Giotto had done. This is quite a bit after Giotto. And he's going to paint some really amazing frescoes right here. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see, just like Fra Angelico, we have a little background, right? So we can see that we're in the foreground here. Something that's closer to you would be bigger, right? And something that's back is going to be smaller. So Fra Angelico had kind of started that. So this guy's smaller back here because he's farther back. Here we can see several of the frescoes that he did telling the story. So he would have been hired by certain churches to paint these frescoes on their walls. Okay, this is kind of a famous one, the expulsion from the garden. Here is the baptism of Jesus, I believe, by John the Baptist. And of course the crucifixion over there. Oh, real quick, see that? Look at that depth you can see with the architectural use there. You can see this is going to have some perspective. If you follow that down the lines, we follow down straight to Jesus. Right, the lines should be up here too. I don't really see them there so much. Okay, so Cosimo de' Medici's son, he had twin. They weren't twins. They were brothers. These sons, his grandsons, Lorenzo and Giuliano. So this is Lorenzo. This is Giuliano, and they were raised in the new way. They went to the Platonic Academy. They learned to read the Greek. They read those great stories from the beginning. They appreciated art from the beginning. Their grandfather really took them under his wing. So the humanist techniques. So they were recapturing the classical approach. At age 21, Lorenzo inherited the Medici power because his father had died. So he took over after his grandfather. So there were rival Florentine families who wanted to take the opportunity to seize the power from the Medici. And so they planned a kind of a coup, all right, to take over. And this is quite a conspiracy right here. So on Sunday, April 26, 1478. Did anybody get the date on Filippo's dome when it was finished? I think the dome wasn't finished. It was Easter Sunday and the brothers went to church. And when they got there, they're inside the dome of the Duomo. Duomo means dome. It's called the Duomo today. And they get here, they were attacked in the middle of Easter church service, both of them. They were stabbed in the church, and Giuliano was killed. Lorenzo was very badly injured. They whisked him out. He's going to survive. The people of Florence were horrified. They rallied to their beloved Lorenzo. He was thought they were young. He was 21 years old. And then they decided that one of the rival families called the Pitti family, the P-I-T-T-I, Pitti family, were responsible. And so there was revenge. The whole town came and attacked the Pitti palace, the Pitti family, and killed them all to punish them for what had happened to the Medici. So now Lorenzo's alone. He is going to become the greatest leader in all of Renaissance Italy. Here he is. This is a famous fresco that was painted of him. Here he is as a young man coming in after this to become the undisputed leader of Florence. He now is called Lorenzo il Magnifico, the Magnificent. He had a arranged political marriage. He married one of the famous Orsinis of Rome. So that was a very prominent family in Rome, and they wanted to tie the two together to make Florence and Rome allied this way through marriage. So there she is, Clarice Orsini. And then he took over the Platonic Academy and brought in all of the up-and-coming artists of the region, all the guys you'll recognize, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and I think we're going to see them next week. But here he is. Anybody who had anything to show, any kind of writers at the time, he would have them in. Oh, and quickly we have to go to the Ottoman. We're going to pick back up on Florence at the very end of this lecture and next week. The Ottoman Empire was the empire that took over after the fall of the Byzantine Empire. So remember, all this time the Muslims have been pushing and pushing and pushing. They're going to finally take Constantinople. Here's the guy, his name is Mehmed, Sultan Mehmed, is going to come in, and he said this: there is only one thing I want, give me Constantinople. And notice this, he's going to attack it. Do you notice something unusual about this war picture?
It's got a cannon.
Aha, what do we need for a cannon?
Gunpowder.
Gunpowder. Okay, so new invention. This isn't the first time it was used. In fact, it was used in one of those battles of the 100 Years' War. Was the first time, I can't remember which one.
And then the French was going to the gun.
Yeah. Okay, so do you remember what battle? So one of the really late ones with Joan of Arc and all that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, but now we're going to see how Mehmed is going to use this. Constantinople is powerless against this gunpowder, and so it falls. So the fall of at one point he had to get to the city, and he couldn't get around by water, so he actually portaged the boats overland to get to another side of the water. So he was very determined to get in. Constantinople falls to him. Here they're out surrendering here. Okay, and then the name was changed. Movie cartoon.
Liked it better that way. Constantinople, we can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the church.
Y'all know this song?
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay, so you remember from now on that it's no longer called Constantinople, it is called Istanbul.
Istanbul.
All right.
Not Constantinople.
Next comes Suleiman the Magnificent with a magnificent hat. He's going to take Istanbul and bring it into the modern era. He built the Blue Mosque there. And he started what is known as the Ottoman Empire. And you can see how big it got right here in his time. Okay, you know the word Ottoman.
Yep.
What do you think of?
Like the
A footrest.
You put your foot on? Yeah, it was developed here in this time. That's why it's called that. It was developed by the Ottomans. Okay. And really quickly, I have to take you that this is almost not worth talking about. There were all these wars. Remember I told you they kind of competed with each other? All those Italian city-states? Well, all of Europe wanted to take over. France, the Holy Roman Empire, they all wanted to come here and take over. And so actually it was France who's gonna try to do that. Our players are Ludovico Sforza of Milan. Ludovico Sforza. And then we have Charles the something, 8 I believe, of France. And then we have Lorenzo de' Medici of Florence and the Pope. So they're all together going to see how this is going to shake out. And we're going to see that Charles is going to win in the beginning. He's actually going to come straight on down through, go all the way to Florence. He's going to kind of go through Rome and everything, go to Florence, and cause there to be a shakeup in Florence at this point. Louis d'Orléans was a cousin of Charles VIII. He reminded Charles that France had a claim in Milan as well as Naples. Look at him. Look at his face. It's a lovely face. All right. This is the Pope. We'll get to know him really well soon. He's Pope Alexander VI, also known as Borgia. Borgia is his name. All right, here's Ludovico. They made a deal, Italy versus France. They fought against the king, and then the Holy Roman Empire said, hey, Spain, you want to help us come down and take over Italy? So now we have France and actually Milan now, Holy Roman Empire and Spain all coming down to challenge France in Italy. Here's the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire. We'll meet him later. His name is Maximilian. And Louis, look, this was Louis d'Orléans. He became Louis the 12th. All right, so he reignited the wars. So he's going to become king after the other guy. Let's skip that. Traveling to Florence. Anybody want to go? So I went and I used something called the Eurail Pass, where you get a pass and you can get on any train. And you just show them the pass and you just get on. And it goes from date A to date Z, whatever you pick. I had like a 6-week pass, and I could get on any of these trains and go through there. So if you're going, a couple things you need to see. If you can find Il Porcello, this is the pig. And notice how it's really shiny, and you're supposed to go rub his nose. And apparently if you rub his nose, you'll go back to Florence someday. A friend of mine went, so it was outside in the marketplace. It took me a long time to find him. I finally found him. My friend and I, we rubbed the nose. And it was outside, but a friend of mine went back recently, and she said it's in a museum now. So she said, we looked for it, we asked around, and we had to go to a museum. I don't know if they still let them touch it. The Uffizi Gallery. Uffizi is the Italian word for office. It's got some of the greatest artwork in the world. Some statuary hall kind of a thing. Lots of great paintings. This is the Ponte Vecchio. The Ponte Vecchio is the bridge going across the Arno. There are shops along here. It used to be where the butchers, I think, were, but now we have jewelry shops and souvenirs and things like this. Here it is at night. Beautiful. Lovely. And then the Pitti Palace, along with all sorts of other architecture to see there. Next week, we'll look at some of the art that's inside. We'll look at some of our famous Renaissance painters and sculptors. Okay, y'all. See you next week. If you have a note with you, can leave it there and I'll come pick it up.
Thank you, Ms. Gaston.
You are welcome.
Thank you for class.
You're welcome.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Do you want my homework?
Okay, so what's going on?
It's week 14, I think.
So you haven't got your book yet?
Oh, we have it.
Oh, you do have it,
Thank you
okay.
so much.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I'll take this. All right, see you
And
next
I
week
got-
then.
What's the homework?
I got this too.
The homework's no
I'm waiting
homework?
for that.
It's no homework, right? No homework this
For
week?
week 15?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's none.
there's just review.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
it's just a
So no
review.
homework. Okay, great.
It's literally a page, like 2 pages of just.
Review, yeah.
Thank you so
So,
much.
all right. Oh, girls, here. Can I give you these? So just fill out these registration forms like you did with the last year.
Sorry.